Never knew that's what the Lord sounded like, but there you go. Good morning, all. It's lovely to be here. Morning, Zoomers. It's good to see you wherever you are. Some of you on holiday, I know, wherever you are. Great to be here. It's also terrifying to be here. It's been a long time since I preached. So no booing, no throwing things, okay? Well, you can if you want, I don't mind. It is really nice to be here. Thank you for your prayers for our family. They've been much appreciated. They've lifted us up. They've kept us going. But please keep praying for us. Things are good at the moment, and we trust God that they will continue to improve. And we're thankful. But we're also thankful for you guys praying for us. So thank you, and please keep it up. Please pray for the mission. Many of you know I work for City Mission. We're in an unusual position now. We're in a kind of that transition time where obviously things are now moving forward again. We're supposed to be freer now, aren't we? We're allowed to do more and all that sort of stuff. But we're in a difficult situation where obviously we work mostly with volunteers. And I felt very strongly at the beginning of the summer, we couldn't say to our volunteers, in September, this is what's going to happen. I said, in September, this is what we'd like to do, but you need to decide if you're in, out, or somewhere in the middle. And so we've had a number of volunteers retire, step back from volunteering just because either, it's been 2 years since they've done it and things move on. It might be that they've gone and volunteered somewhere else. So they just feel it's time to move on. We've lost a few due to COVID and other things. Some are raring to go. Terry and Rose are there every week. Terry almost looks happy, doesn't he, sometimes? He's not on, is he? And then there's some that are just going, I'm not quite ready. And so they're going, we want to wait to see what happens in September and in October before we come back. So we're in a difficult position where actually we want to open things, but we haven't quite got enough people at the moment to do it safely. So please pray that we open the right projects at the right time, that we all stay safe. Because my primary feeling is I want to keep our volunteers safe. So please pray for wisdom on that, for us and for them. So I get to speak over the next 2 weeks with you. I'm sharing about thankfulness, about obedience, and about growing in Christ. And they all kind of blend together, don't they? It would be easy to think of obedience on its own. It'd be easy to think of thankfulness on its own. But actually, they kind of create a cycle, don't they? Because we all know if we do the right thing, usually good things happen. And then we're thankful, which then encourages us to do the right thing next time. And we become thankful. And it's one of those cycles. But isn't it easy to break that cycle? Isn't it easy to do what we want to do when we want to do it? How easy is it to do what we do and then never say thank you? And so hopefully over the next 2 weeks, we'll be able to look at that a little bit more and how by being obedient and remembering to be thankful, we will grow in our faith, in our relationship with Jesus. This morning, I'm looking at a slightly unusual passage. It's one that I don't think I've ever heard preached on in church. I've heard it online. I wouldn't worry too much about diving into your Bibles because it goes over about 3 or 4 chapters and we don't have time to read it all. Otherwise, we'd just read it and then we'd all go home. But we're looking at Balaam's donkey. I've been working really hard on saying donkey. If I get it wrong and I say the other word, I apologize. Somebody thought it was very funny that I was going to say a rude word in church. But we're going for Balaam's donkey this week to look at obedience and how that can teach us to be obedient. And then next week, we're going to be looking at Job as we think about thankfulness. And somewhere in between, hopefully growing in Christ will be mixed in there. And we'll all come to the end of next week and we'll be raring to go. Are you an obedient person? It's a rhetorical question. You don't have to tell me. It's, you're not disobedient by not answering. But are you an obedient person? I bet when you were young, when you were a toddler, maybe even older, you had to be told what to do, where to go, how to behave, remember your P's and Q's, wipe your nose, Don't do this, do that, don't touch that, don't go there. Yeah? But how many times do we push against calls for obedience? Not just as a toddler, but now. Why? I can remember my kids saying that. I can remember saying it myself as a child. Why? You hit that lovely age somewhere between 2 and 4, don't you, where the answer to every question or everything you're told is why. Can you go and do that? Why? Because I want you to. Why? Hands up if you were that parent that said Z just to annoy your child, because I know I've done it, and I knew my parents did it to me. Why? Z. What? I don't want to. You can't make me. No. We all do it. Whether we say it out loud, even as adults now, the fact we're all giggling would indicate that we still do it to an extent. It might be to people that we don't see, rules and regulations that are out there. It might be to our nearest and dearest who we think we can get away with it with, but we all do it. I'm sure they're just some of the responses that we give. I'm sure there are others too, maybe some a little bit more rude. But we hope that as we grow up, as we develop in our age and in our common sense, our moral compass might develop. You know, that maturity means actually we probably understand that we need to be a little bit more obedient. Or do we? Hands off the wet paint. How many of us have done it? Oh, it's wet. My kids at home have Andy and the girls love doing nails and stuff, and it's 60-second nail varnish. It dries in 60 seconds. Why? Because we can't wait longer. And even at 60 seconds, and they'll probably listen to this, they'll probably be in trouble. 45 seconds in, we're still going, because we can't obey the rules to wait 60 seconds. We all think we can bend the rules. Keep off the grass. Don't drink and drive. One-way streets. We've all done things that, you know, maybe we're disobedient, but maybe you're sitting there this morning going, I've never done anything like that. I am extremely obedient. But actually, I think there are times in our lives when the rules, the regulations, the guidelines, the advice isn't listened to. And boy, have we been through 18 months where we've been called to be obedient, haven't we? Stay inside. Wear a mask. You're all doing beautifully. Don't hug each other. That was the hardest one for me. I don't know about you. We're all sitting so far apart and we can't, you know. Get a vaccine. And yet so many people still push back, don't they? We've had the experts, and I'm talking the experts, not the other people. The experts giving us scientific explanations as to why we need to do what we are told at the moment. And yet still some push back. Why? I don't want to. You can't make me. No. Doesn't make us giggle, does it, when we think it's adults, not children? Because actually we've heard it a lot. My brother Jonathan, my younger brother, works for a supermarket up in the north of England. And we were chatting a few weeks ago and he said that every member of his team at some point in the last 18 months have either been verbally or physically abused for challenging somebody about wearing a mask. That's just disgusting, isn't it? That we can live in a world like that, of people being so disobedient that they're willing to be verbally or physically aggressive to another person. So I don't know why obedience comes easily to some of us and harder for others. So I suppose the question we're asking today is, what is God saying to you at the moment? Is God asking you to do something or to stop something? And how are you responding? I want to spend a little time looking at obedience today. And as I say, I want to use a man and his donkey as our example. As I say, the story of Balaam and his donkeys is too long, really, to go into as a passage we read. But if you have time to later today or at some point, it's worth going back. It's not very often in church we get encouraged to go and read the book of Numbers. If you can't remember where it is, I think it's the fourth book. Is it the fourth book, Mike? Yes, just nod, Mike. Just nod, because then we're either both right or both wrong. In the Old Testament, the story starts around chapter 22, and I thought I'd give you a rundown of what happens. I have to say, it's one of the weirdest stories in the Bible. It is one of those stories you kind of, when I first heard it, I went, "Are you sure that's in the Bible?" Because it is really, really strange. The Moabites, descendants of an incestuous offspring of Lot, didn't like the fact that the Israelites were just getting a little bit too close to their land during the Exodus. So we're back in Exodus times. And they were getting twitchy that the Israelites were getting a little bit too close. And so rather than talking to somebody and going, actually, what's going on, they got aggressive in those times, didn't they? Balak, the king, they knew what Israel had been up to and how they'd handled one of his enemies, the Amorites. And fearing for his kingdom, for his people, Balak decides there's something he should do. And he summons Balaam, who is a prophet, but maybe not a prophet as we understand a prophet later in the Bible, because this prophet could come and curse people or bless people. So Balak summons him and asks him to come and curse the Israelites because they basically didn't like them. He didn't trust them, didn't want them around. And Balak sends a message to Balaam in chapter 22, verse 6. He says, "For I know that whoever you bless is blessed, and whoever you curse is cursed." Now, Balaam apparently can't curse the Israelites without receiving the Lord's permission first. So this strange thing where he can go to God and say, "This is what somebody's asked me to do. Can I go and curse them? Or can I go and bless them?" So it's really unusual in kind of the stories we hear from the Bible. But God says, "Why would I allow you to curse people that I have blessed?" So no, you can't do it. And you'd think that would be the end of the story. And obedient Balaam would go, "Do you know what? God said no, we're going to have to find a different way." He goes back, sends the officials back to Balak, the king, and says, "Go back to your country. The Lord has refused to let me go with you." And at that point, he's being obedient. It sounds like he's listened to God. God said no. God's even given him a reason. God doesn't need to give us reasons to see. He can just say no. Balaam listens and says, "God says no, it's a no." Being obedient to God. But despite hearing this, the Moabite king Balak says, "I know, go back, offer him money, offer him treasures beyond his wildest dreams. See what happens then." And so the officials go back to Balaam and says, "If you do this, if you come and curse the Israelites, Balak promises you silver and treasures beyond your wildest dreams." Now, if Balaam was obedient, what would his answer have been straight away? No, because you remember God said, "I can't do it because God has blessed them. Why would he let me curse them?" And Balaam says, "Give me 24 hours and I'll see what I can do." He says, let me go and talk to God, and I'll maybe he'll change his mind. Now, we know God's not going to change his mind if we go back and go, "They promised us some money. Can I go now?" But he thinks that he can change God's mind. So Balaam goes back and he spends time listening to God, praying to God, and saying, "What do you think? I think I should go. Look at what they've offered." And God obviously is a bit fed up at this point. And it's easy to read and think God has changed his mind, because God says, go with them, but only do what I tell you. God's got a plan. He's had enough. He thinks Balaam is being disobedient. He feels like he's trying to change God's mind. And he says, go. If that's what you really, really think is the right thing to do, then go. But if you read on, you see that God is displeased with Balaam, just for questioning the fact that God had already given a response. So Balaam moves off with the officials from the country, from the Moabites, and he's on his donkey, riding along on a donkey. Now, we know donkeys are obedient creatures, aren't they? They might be stubborn at times. We know that they're strong. They can, I think is it 10 times their own weight they can carry or something like that? But actually, if they're in relationship with an owner, they're usually pretty compliant and they will do what they're asked to do. And so Balaam's on his donkey with everyone else going off in the direction to Moab. And all of a sudden, the donkey starts acting a bit weird. The donkey looks ahead and starts braying. I'm not going to do an impression of a braying donkey because I'm not. But you can imagine the donkey is upset. The donkey starts to bray. Why? Balaam can't understand what's going on. And then all of a sudden, the donkey starts to veer off the path. Everybody else is going straight and the donkey's just really getting stressed. And Balaam's getting really cross. But what Balaam doesn't know is that God has sent an angel. And we're not talking one of those beautiful, cute children angels that we see at the Nativity. You know what I mean? With the silver tinsel. We're talking a warrior angel. We're talking an angel that's come to kill Balaam. With a sword, you can imagine the muscles and everything. Terrifying. But only the donkey can see. So even though the donkey usually would be obedient to his master, the donkey starts to move away. And so in the end, Balaam gets off the donkey and beats him. Why are you not doing as I tell you? Why won't you do what you should be doing? Sounds a bit like Balaam and God. So it all calms down. The angel's disappeared. The donkey's back on track. Balaam is back on the back of the donkey. Everything's going well. And they come into this path through a vineyard. And all of a sudden, the donkey starts braying again and panicking and twitching. And the angel's back. The angel's back in the middle of the path. The path is wide enough that if the donkey goes right against the edge, the donkey can get past. Balaam's angry with it and trying to get it back into the middle of the road to do what Balaam wants. But instead, the donkey pushes towards the edge to protect him and his master and hurts the master's foot against the edge. And again, Balaam responds by getting off the donkey and beating the donkey. You can imagine the noise. A donkey is not quiet. And then it all goes quiet again because the angel's gone, the donkey's calmed down, Balaam's back on the back, and they're off again. And then they come to almost a ravine. Tiny little cut through where they can go through, but they're almost going through one at a time. And the donkey looks up, and there's the angel again, right in the path, sword drawn. The donkey starts to bray. The donkey knows he can't get through. There's no way they're going to get through this. So what does the donkey do? Drops down on the ground, stops, because again, he's trying to protect his master. Again, the master starts to beat him. You can imagine the donkey at this point is becoming even more vocal than before. He saw the angel and he probably was braying with fear. When he was beaten by his master, he was probably being braying with pain and with a sense of sadness almost, that his master was beating him. But then suddenly the brays turn into words. This time God opens the donkey's mouth. What have I done to you to make you beat me these 3 times? Now, any of you got a pet at home, unless it's a parrot or something like that, I think you'd be pretty freaked out if your pet started talking to you. But Balaam just replies like it's normal, like he's so het up, he's so, when you get so cross about something, you kind of forget almost how the normal world lives. And Balaam's so angry that he hears the donkey. What have you done? What have I done to you? Why? And instead of going, that's not right, Balaam says, you've made a fool of me. Talking to a donkey. You've made a fool of me. If I had my sword in my hand now, I would kill you. And the donkey replies, am I not the donkey that you have always ridden? Have I not always been obedient to you? Have I not always been a good donkey? Have I done this before? Balaam still in the conversation. Balaam says, no. And at that point, God opens Balaam's eyes. Not to the fact the donkey is speaking, he opens his eyes to the angel in the road with the drawn sword. And he realizes that the donkey was there to protect him. The donkey had been afraid, but his overriding feeling was to protect his master. And then Balaam realizes that God was angry with him, that God wanted him to be obedient, like the obedient donkey who wanted to protect his master. God wanted Balaam to realize that God's answer was no, and that actually he needed to follow him. And Balaam repents. And the angel tells him to continue to Moab. But instead of issuing a curse, God tells him to say a blessing. So the total opposite of what the king has asked him to do. And if you stop at that point, it would appear that Balaam's life has turned around. That Balaam has gone from being disobedient to obedient, to being without any gratitude for his donkey, to being thankful for his donkey. And if you stop there, that's what would appear to happen. But if you read on, as I say, read on a few chapters, and you'll see that Balaam is not a nice guy. He will still try and manipulate. He will still try and twist what God wants him to do. He still fails to be fully obedient to God. And some of the things I picked out of the story of Balaam is that the first thing is that obedience is 100%. You can't be a little bit obedient. It's like being a little bit pregnant. It's not possible. You're either pregnant or you're not. And in reality, you're either obedient or you're not. It's black and white. It's binary. There's no way around it. Either you are an obedient person or you're not. Balaam is approached by the king, and initially he does the right thing, so we think he is obedient. He seeks God's opinion on it, and then is obedient to God's response. But almost immediately he's tempted by the promises of riches, and he tries to convince God that his way is better. How many times have we done that? How many times have we been obedient for the first bit, but then we try and negotiate our way out and go 90% or 80%? When I joined the mission, I got this app on my phone that reminds you of things you put on social media over the years. And 3 days ago, it said that 13 years ago, I was resting between jobs, which means I've just finished my 13th year of City Mission, and I'm about to start my 14th. And at the time, God said, there's this job going, Darren, I want you to apply for it. So I applied for it. And I asked the mission, I may have told you this before, I asked the mission, the people working there, to send me all the paperwork through about the job. And they sent all the paperwork through. And the only thing that hadn't come through was the salary. And I thought, it can't be an unpaid role. That's impossible. So I emailed the person that sent it to me and said, thank you for all this information. It's brilliant. You did all those things you do in interviews. It got my name written all over it and all that rubbish. And I said, the only thing I can't see is the salary. Could you send me the salary? And so I'd already convinced myself and convinced Andy and convinced anybody I'd spoken to it was my job. And then the person emailed back and said, sorry about that, here's the salary. And immediately my heart sank because it was 20% lower than what I was leaving. And we couldn't afford it. And so having said to God, I think this is the job that you want me to do. And God said, yes, I want you to do it. And I said, yeah, I'll do it. I'll apply. I then saw the salary and immediately went to God and went, I can't apply for this. I can't do it. You don't understand, God. I know you're saying you want me to do it, but you need more money. You need to get me some more money, God. And through a story that's too long now, God convinced me to apply and to trust him and to be obedient. And it took, I think it was 8 or 9 years for me to go back to that place of the same salary as when I left the place before. But God never let us down. God always provided. God always he fulfilled his promises that he said he would if I applied for the job. And so that initial me trying to be partially obedient, yeah, of course, Lord, I'll apply for this job. I'll do it if that's what you call me to do, turned into, I'll do it, but Lord, could you do this? And we know that's not how God works, is it? That's what Balaam was doing. Okay, I won't go. Well, I'll tell you what, God, what if I do go and I say yes to the money, but it's not how it works? Is God asking you to be obedient at the moment? Are you trying to negotiate a better deal? When I went to the mission, I said, yeah, look, Lord, I'll do it, but I think I should be there a year. I'll give it a year, and I'll give you a year, Lord, to find someone that can do it when I go. How arrogant is that? And then about 10 years on, I realized that's what I said, and I repented. Lord, I'm sorry, because you obviously had a plan. You wanted me to be here. But I wanted to be obedient, but on my terms. I was trying to negotiate a better deal. Is that you today? Is God asking you to do something? Is God asking you to stop something? And are you saying, yeah, I will, but? The second thing that came out to me was that obedience takes commitment. You might be able to talk the talk, but can you walk the walk? It's interesting, Mike was talking about guide dogs earlier, because I'm about to talk about our guide dog. We, many years ago now, we had a guide dog, breeding dog, a Labrador, beautiful yellow lab called Ingrid. We didn't name her, she came named. We had her for around 12 years, and she was awesome. Well, I'd had dogs all my life, and by far she was the most amazing dog I'd ever come into contact with. People used to visit our house, and they would always go, oh, isn't she well behaved? Isn't she obedient? One night, well, for anybody that's been in our house, you know we've got a small through lounge, and one night we had the youth group over, and they'd got pizza and popcorn and videos and stuff. And the dog was just walking through all of these trays and plates and not touching any of it. And she was dribbling, you know what dogs do. But she was so well behaved, she wouldn't do anything wrong. And people would go, oh, you must be so proud of her. You've done such a good job. But actually, she wasn't well behaved and obedient out of chance. And really, she wasn't well behaved and obedient because of us. She was well behaved and obedient because she'd spent a year being trained by guide dogs. So we didn't get her till she was 13 months old, by which point she'd been trained. And even then, when she came in, you could see she was like, ha ha, they're new. Fresh meat, I can get away with some stuff. And for the first few weeks, she just pushed the boundaries a little bit, like a toddler. And then she became obedient. But she still made mistakes. She was, I think, 14 when we lost her. And even at 14, she could still not walk next to you. She had to pull the lead. And you know how small Ondi is compared to me. Ondi spent most of those 14 years like this. And we tried every single thing to stop her pulling. But she was so excited about what's around the next corner that she always pulled. So she still made mistakes. We all make mistakes. But she was so obedient. She knew she would be praised for doing the right thing. She knew she would be praised for coming back. We used to walk her out the back here, and the biggest way to freak her out was if Andy and I went in different directions. She used to turn into a sheepdog. She would try and herd us back in and protect us. But actually, it was all about teaching her to be obedient and making sure she stayed with us and she looked for us rather than us looking for her. And God calls us to trust in him, doesn't he? To be obedient to him, to look for him, to look for the call to us from him, to hear his command. He expects us to be obedient. But just like we did with Ingrid, God lets us off the lead, doesn't he? And sometimes we can wander off, and sometimes we can get lost behind a tree or something like that. And it's sometimes not always easy to get back. He hopes that the words he's spoken over us, the love, forgiveness, compassion that he's shown us, will stick in our minds. And that even when we drift off, even when we make bad decisions, we will turn round and go back. By spending time in his word and in prayer and in fellowship, isn't it wonderful to be in fellowship? Our obedience training will be strengthened. I wonder whether we need a refresher course. It's been so long, hasn't it? 18 months. Mike said, you can stand up and sing. And I went, am I allowed to? Are you sure about that? Can I do it with a mask on or mask off? Because we've all been trained differently, haven't we? We need a refresher course. And finally and quickly, obedience is repetitive. We don't tend to get asked once, do we? One chance in your life to be obedient. It tends to keep coming. It doesn't come with a tick box on one of those forms. Those lovely things on computers at the moment saying, I am not a robot. Tick. I don't think I am, so I tick it. It's not done. Tick. Move on. That's it. Obedience. We've sorted it. We've done obedience. Let's move on to, I don't know, grace, something else. It's not how it works. Obedience is a lifelong, repetitive call on our lives. But the good news is that we have a God of grace, don't we? And that even when we do make mistakes, even when we're not obedient immediately, we know that God gives us a way out, a way back, another chance. We've only got to look at stories in the Bible. I want to be obedient because I don't want to end up in a big whale and things like that. But actually, we know we don't always do obedience straight away, easily, quickly. We sometimes negotiate. But actually, overall, we know if we are obedient, as I said, we can become thankful because we see that God's way is the right way. That God's call on our lives, he wants the best for us. And it might not be easy. The things he calls us to do, he doesn't promise it'll be easy, but he promises when we look back, we will be thankful. And we'll move on to that next week. Mike, I'm going to pass on. I can't remember what the final song is. It's in there. Yeah, but I haven't got my glasses. Come on, I'm not that organised.